You've been performing for so long, you forgot who you were before the applause. You don't need a new identity. You need to come home to the one you abandoned. It's time to change the narrative. It's time to recognize who you are. You are not an imposter. You are not a mistake. You are not a placeholder in your own life. You expose their sense of entitlement the moment you stop shrinking. Narcissists don't just want control, they believe they are entitled to it. They believe they should have access to your mind, your decisions, your confidence, your emotional landscape. And when you finally stepped back and saw the dynamic for what it was, their entitlement became visible in a way it had never been before. They weren't just trying to influence you, they were trying to own the narrative of who you were allowed to be. A narcissist's entitlement is rooted in the belief that your identity should orbit around their needs. They expect you to adjust your tone, your boundaries, your brilliance, your truth, just to keep them comfortable. And when you didn't, they reacted like something had been stolen from them, but nothing was stolen. You simply reclaimed what was yours, your clarity, your autonomy, your voice. They thought they were entitled to control you because for a long time you didn't challenge the control. You questioned yourself instead of questioning them. You doubted your instincts instead of doubting their behavior. You interpreted their manipulation as misunderstanding, their criticism as guidance, their dominance as leadership. And that confusion is exactly what made you feel like an imposter in your own life. Narcissists create imposter feelings by design. They chip away at your confidence until you start believing that your accomplishments are accidental, your strengths are exaggerated, and your intuition is unreliable. They need you to feel unsure because your uncertainty keeps them in power. When you don't trust yourself, you become dependent on their approval, and that dependency is the fuel for their entitlement. But the moment you saw the pattern, the spell broke. You exposed their entitlement simply by naming it. You exposed it by refusing to internalize their projections. You exposed it by recognizing that their need for control was never about your inadequacy. It was about their insecurity. Narcissists don't target you because you're weak. They target you because you're strong. They target you because your clarity threatens their confusion. When you confronted the truth, they lost access to the version of you they could manipulate. They lost access to the version of you that apologized for things you didn't do. They lost access to the version of you that overexplained, overperformed, and overaccommodated. They lost access to the version of you that believed their entitlement was authority instead of dysfunction. And that loss felt like an injury to them. Narcissists experience your boundaries as betrayal. They experience your independence as disrespect. They experience your clarity as rebellion. They experience your self-trust as an attack. Because in their mind, they were entitled to your confusion. They were entitled to your silence. They were entitled to your self-doubt. But you didn't betray them. You simply stopped betraying yourself. You stopped giving them access to your identity. You stopped giving them access to your emotional bandwidth. You stopped giving them access to your internal narrative. You stopped giving them access to the parts of you they used to twist into insecurity. And when you stopped giving them access, their entitlement became loud. They tried to guilt you. They tried to shame you. They tried to rewrite the story so they could remain the hero and you could remain the problem. But you didn't fall for it this time. You saw the pattern clearly, and clarity is something narcissists cannot survive. Your clarity exposed their confusion. Your boundaries exposed their dependence on your compliance. Your truth exposed their need for control. Your confidence exposed their fear of losing influence. Your awakening exposed the illusion they built around you. The illusion that you were small, uncertain, and unqualified. The truth is that they never made you feel like an imposter because you were one. They made you feel like an imposter because your power threatened their position. They needed you to question yourself so they could remain unquestioned. They needed you to dim so they could shine. They needed you to doubt so they could dominate. But once you saw yourself clearly, their entitlement had nowhere to hide. You recognized that their control was never earned, it was taken. You recognized that their authority was never legitimate, it was imposed. You recognized that their dominance was never natural, it was manufactured through manipulation, criticism, and emotional distortion. And now that you see the truth, you can never unsee it. You can never go back to the version of yourself that believed their entitlement was normal. You can never go back to the version of yourself that mistook their control for care. You can never go back to the version of yourself that accepted their narrative as your identity. You expose their sense of entitlement simply by reclaiming your own. You reclaim the right to define yourself. You reclaim the right to trust yourself. You reclaim the right to belong to yourself. You reclaim the right to live without asking for permission from someone who was never qualified to give it. And here's the part they never expected. Once you reclaimed yourself, you became immune to their tactics. The same comments that once pierced you now fall flat. The same manipulation that once confused you now reads like a script you've already memorized. The same emotional games that once destabilized you no longer have an entry point. Your clarity closed the door they used to walk through. You also began to see how predictable their reactions were. The anger wasn't about your behavior. It was about their loss of control. The accusations weren't about your character. They were projections of their own. The sudden coldness wasn't about your choices. It was punishment for your independence. Narcissists don't respond to truth. They respond to threat. And your clarity is the greatest threat they've ever faced. What they called disrespect was actually your healing. What they labeled selfishness was actually your boundary. What they framed as changing was actually you returning to yourself. Narcissists rewrite your growth as betrayal because they cannot survive a version of you that no longer needs their approval. Your evolution exposes their stagnation. And now, standing in your truth, you can finally see the full picture. They never had the right to control you. They never had the authority to define you. They never had the insight to guide you. They never had the emotional maturity to hold you. Their entitlement was never real. It was only effective when you didn't know who you were. But here's the punchline they never saw coming. You didn't just walk away. You outgrew the entire dynamic. You stopped playing the role they wrote for you. You stopped participating in the emotional theater they depended on. You stopped giving them the reaction that fed their ego. Growth is the one thing a narcissist cannot manipulate, and you grew anyway. Your clarity didn't just expose their entitlement, it exposed their limits. It showed you how small their emotional range really was. It showed you how fragile their confidence actually is. It showed you how dependent they were on your confusion to feel powerful. When you became clear, they became irrelevant. That's the part they can't recover from. And now you understand something essential. Their entitlement was never personal. It was structural. They behave this way with anyone who threatens their illusion. You just happen to be the one who woke up. You were the one who saw behind the curtain. You were the one who realized that their control was a performance, and you stopped applauding. Your clarity is the end of their story and the beginning of yours. You are no longer an imposter in your own life. You are no longer a character in their narrative. You are no longer a source of supply for their ego. You are your own authority now, and nothing threatens a narcissist more than someone who finally knows who they are. And once you know who you are, Their entitlement has no place to land. It dissolves. It collapses. It loses its power because clarity is the one thing they cannot manipulate, imitate, or overpower. Clarity is your liberation and their undoing. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin the work of separating who you are from who you've been performing to be, because it's time to stop performing and start belonging. Welcome to the work. Welcome to the becoming. Welcome to Unmasking the Imposter. Thank you for listening to the Impostor Phenomenon podcast. If today's episode opened something in you, share it with someone who needs this conversation too. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to go deeper, get ready to join our community where we're doing the real work of reclaiming identity, rewriting narratives, and rebuilding belonging from the inside out. Remember, you are not an imposter. You are not a mistake. You are the author, and your story is far from finished.